the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And today's question is Did you know that only 30% of speakers in Australia are women or identify as women? Why is this a problem? And is this something that we need to change? Well, our guest for today is the perfect expert, the perfect guest to answer that question. And she is on a mission to change that. Jules is the founder of Handle Your Own PR. She's the Boss Group, an Australian women's speakers. In She's the Boss, Jules runs online and offline events nationally, a podcast called She's the Boss Chats, a She's the Boss YouTube channel as well, and a digital magazine called Maggie. That's a cute name, by the way. She
No.
started a live stream video show in early 2024. Jules also has a course and mentoring service called How to Become a Woman of Influence, where she teaches women how to raise their profile. And in late 2023, Jules started Australian Women Speaker after she realized that only 30% of speakers are women. And today she is going to share her story, her insight, her experience. Jules, you are looking lovely and pinkish today. I love the color. How are you doing? Thank you for coming on the
I'm
show.
doing very well. Thank you so much for inviting me on, Josh. And I'll let you know that from what I can see, that stat of only 30% of speakers on stages are women is also in America and in the UK. So it's a
Interesting.
global issue that women aren't getting on stages enough.
Wow,
They're not
that's
being given
interesting.
opportunities, I should say.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, we're really now definitely gonna get into that.
Cool.
But before we truly get into it, Jules, what led you to this path? Have you always known that yeah, your path when it comes to women empowerment, so to speak, your path when it comes to speaking engagement as a child, did you always know that you were going to be this lovely woman with pink hair and pink attire and everything? What is the story of Jules Brooke?
I weirdly grew up with three brothers and I have three sons. So I'm
Mhm,
surrounded by men. Actually,
mhm,
even the dog is a man,
mhm,
or a male dog.
mhm,
Dog is a man, sorry. Anyway, so I've kind of grown up with men around me, but I've always believed and my dad was a big advocate for women, and basically I always believed that I could do whatever I wanted to do. And
mhm.
there is something, and I'm sure any women listening who have turned over 50 will agree with me, but there is something weird that happens when you turn 50 and you just go, I kind of don't care anymore what people say about me or think about me. I want to follow the path that I think is right. And I've
Mhm.
been, as you mentioned earlier, I started a business called Handle Your Own PR. I've been teaching PR for a long time to
Mhm.
small business owners, but that was nearly always women. And one of the things that I discovered is that a lot of women suffer from imposter syndrome and feel like they're not good enough. And so they don't, I mean, we know this with jobs that women, that I don't know whether you've heard this anecdote, but if women see a job description and they can do 95% of it, they'll go, I'm not sure whether I should apply because I
Hmm.
haven't got all the skills. And
Okay.
men who have 40% of the skills will go, I'm going to give it a go. So
Right.
that's just an example. Another one is that helping women to write out their stories, I
Right.
realize that most of them say
Mhm.
there's nothing interesting about me. Why would anyone want to listen?
Right.
And yet
Right.
they have incredible stories. So I've spent a lot of time over the last 20 years really encouraging women to get out there.
Mhm.
And then I was lucky enough to have a TV show on a streaming network called Ticker TV. And in that show, I remember saying to the guy who owned it, listen, we've got to have a show about women in business because the stats for women, you just don't see business women very often on television,
Mhm.
especially in Australia.
Wow.
and
Wow.
especially with free to air television. So that's kind of where it started. And from those interviews, I started being aware of some of the stats for women. And I'm sure you've heard that in terms of funding for businesses, women globally can access about 1.5 to 3% of VC funding. So we don't get our businesses funded. There's all sorts of pretty horrific stats. Women appear in 1% of history books. So I knew that young girls, and I interviewed as part of my podcast the Deputy Prime Minister of England's wife, interestingly, because she
Hmm.
had started a group called Inspiring Girls. And
Okay.
she discovered that girls 16, 11 to 16 were saying they couldn't see role models. They couldn't see women doing jobs they wanted
Oh
to do
my.
when they grow up. And it
Mm.
was kind of learning these stats. Another stat I heard from the Gina Davis Institute of Media Diversity was that women over 50 appear in less than 4% of media globally. So it was all these things that kind of made
Wow.
me go, hang on a minute, somebody needs to make change happen.
Hmm.
And why
Hmm.
don't I jump on my soapbox and start talking about what's going on? And that's really what led
Hmm.
to She's the Boss. And I'm
Wow.
also in Melbourne in Australia, and we were the
Uh-huh.
most locked down city in the world during the
Hmm.
pandemic. So we
Hmm.
had almost 2 years of lockdown.
Hmm.
And during that time, obviously, a lot of women who were running businesses were really scared and worried that their career was over, that they weren't going to
Right.
be able to run their businesses. So I started running online lunches every week for female
Oh.
founders and women running businesses. And from that, She's the Boss grew. So I called it She's the Boss. I started a Facebook group. Then, when I stopped working on the Ticker TV, I decided I'd continue to interview incredible, successful businesswomen from around the world and started the YouTube channel. And it's just kind of grown from there. And then at the end of last year, as part of my course, I teach in part of how to become a person of influence or a woman of influence. I teach podcasting, LinkedIn, awards. I can't even remember what the other two bits are, networking and online courses. And
Hmm.
as a result of that, I was teaching a group of women, and I went, well, if you want to get on a stage,
Hmm.
where do you go? Where can these women sign up to say that they're available? And I realized that when you go searching for women speakers outside of the bureaus, because not
Right.
everybody wants to deal with a bureau, the only way you can find them is individual LinkedIn profiles where people have put
Right.
speaker. And I just thought,
Mhm.
this is crazy. In
Exactly.
Australia, we are, I hate to say it, but we're 43rd in the world for gender equality, even though we are fourth in the world for tertiary education. I
Really.
know it blows your mind, and
I.
so
Yeah.
and so I thought, well, if we're going to get these role models, we need to have more women on stages, and
Hmm.
so that's what started. Thought I'd start a little LinkedIn group and call it Australian Women Speakers. I invited 30 women into it. There's now well over 1,000 in there, and I recently launched a directory so that people can go in and find women speakers
Wow.
at womenspeakers.com.au.
Wow.
So that's kind
Wow.
of
Wow.
in a nutshell what I've been up to.
I mean, it's quite the you rattled off some very mind blowing stats on there that I feel
I
like
know.
it's well, one part of it is because you know equality has been more in the forefront lately at the
Yes,
at least, right? People are more aware, people are more vocal about it, and you just kind of start forgetting that it's still very skewed, it's still very
very skewed.
feel
And
very
but a
skewed.
lot of it is it's unconscious things. It was like
Hmm.
another thing I saw, and this was from a woman in America,
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
the reading list for MBAs. So we know that the leaders in most organizations have done an MBA. They are the people who are the top of the tree. The reading list is 100% white Anglo-Saxon male authors. So there's just a really subtle thing where you think the people that come out of those MBAs see
Hmm.
that men are the leaders and they're not listening
Hmm.
to women's voices. And so it perpetuates this situation. Yeah. So anyway, this is why I've jumped on my soapbox. And I think if there's any women listening, they'll agree that when you hit 50, you kind of hit your stride and go, okay, it's time for me to do something about it.
This is it. Well, of course, you are the boss, and you are finding the other bosses as well in other women. We've mentioned it a lot. You have your boss group. She's the boss group as well. You run podcasts, you run events. You. I love that you said you also run luncheons and all that, and of course your digital magazine. how do you manage to juggle all of these together? What,
I
of
don't
course,
know.
the there
That's
you go.
not a
That's a
good
good
question
question.
because the answer is I
Mhm.
have no idea how I'm doing it, but I'm doing it.
Well, it feels like I think the additional question to that was like, what was the motivation behind it? But you clearly already answered that because you're
Yeah.
trying to change something in the world, having a more platform for women, more recognition, so to speak. What so far? What has been the most rewarding part of this multi-faceted approach? You're approaching it from all different angles. What has been the most rewarding part of it? And is there a significant story that stands out for you?
Oh gosh, I have so many
Oh,
significant
please! I
stories,
love stories.
particularly out of my podcast. So
Mhm.
I think one of the most amazing things that has come out of it that I didn't foresee, and it's something that I talk to a lot of people about, and you would know from doing podcasts,
Mhm.
is that you can reach out to really extraordinary people and say, I'd
Yes.
love to help share your story.
Mhm.
And I think probably the most amazing thing that has come out of what I've been doing has been the women that I have met, both in Australia and overseas, who are like me, trying to make change happen in the world. And I guess certainly in the Australian media, we only really see incredible women if they are unicorns. You know, if they have built something that is so extraordinary,
Yeah.
hardly anyone in the
Yes.
world can do it. And
Mhm.
what I really wanted to do was show that there are incredible women all over the place who are under the radar that people don't know about, who
Mhm.
have achieved incredible things and are
Mhm.
doing things to help other people.
Mhm.
One of the best things that's come out of it is that I have this amazing network of extraordinary women that I've managed to showcase. And I guess what I also find really gratifying is that I am connecting women and helping women to become more visible. And as a result, we are providing role models for those
Wow.
younger girls that might be
Wow.
saying, when I grow up, I'd love to run a business, but only, extraordinary women can run huge businesses. And that's just not true.
Wow. I love that, and of course, I love how you say that there aren't enough. I'm still surprised by it. I'm still pretty blown away that there aren't enough role models for girls to look up to,
I
especially
know
in
it's
different careers. Like
exactly.
you'd want
So, would you
these.
like me to tell you a couple of stories about
Oh,
some of the
please,
women that I've
please,
interviewed?
please,
I,
please.
I just, if you would like a couple of
I'd love
stories.
to. Joe, basically, the second name of the show is stories, so we love stories on this show. So
Okay,
please,
great,
please.
because I love stories too. And off the top of my head, some of the well, let me talk to you first about the Deputy Prime Minister of England. So her name
Mhm.
is Miriam Gonzalez Duartes. She's an absolutely incredible woman. I
Mhm.
chased her down via LinkedIn. I absolutely love LinkedIn for guests. And I'd found this woman who was doing a campaign that went all across social media in about 2021. And it was hashtag this little girl is me. And she had decided to
Wow.
ask very prominent women to put up a photo of themselves when they were 7 or 8 and
Wow.
then to say what they wanted to be when they grew up and what they were doing
Ah,
now. And it was
wow.
so powerful. And I knew that Angela Merkel had done it, Michelle Obama did it. She managed to get extraordinary people. So when I interviewed her, I
Mhm.
actually don't research my interview guests very much. I like to ask them the questions, So I actually didn't know her role. I only knew her as this woman who'd started inspiring girls. And
Mhm.
what I discovered about her was her incredible story of growing up in a dusty little village in Spain, that she had married this guy who she absolutely adored.
Mhm.
He was interested in politics. She mentioned that the media had been a bit mean to her at stages, and I just let it go. I didn't
Wow.
question that. But what she is trying to do now to help provide role models for young girls, I find incredibly inspiring. Another woman that I interviewed, I mean, I've got incredible life stories as well. So there's one woman I interviewed who was a nurse for sort of an emergency nurse. So
Right.
she would get onto planes and go to countries. So Australia has got countries like Samoa and Fiji and countries in the Pacific near us. She was flying out to Samoa one day to pick up a woman who'd had an operation and it hadn't gone well, and it was an emergency evacuation, and they were bringing her back to Australia. They were on the plane. It was her, a couple of pilots, and I think there was she was the nurse, and there were the husband of the woman who'd had the operation and the woman who was strapped into a gurney. They were
Ooh.
flying through the night
Mhm.
in a storm. They went near Norfolk Island. Now, Norfolk
Mhm.
Island is miles from anywhere, basically. I don't know how far it is, flights from Australia, but let's say it's a tiny dot in the Pacific.
Mhm.
That, and as they were approaching, they crashed
Oh
into
my.
the ocean at
Oh my.
200 kilometers an hour.
Oh
They
my.
all survived,
Oh
but
my.
she was sitting in the part of the plane that broke, and she was the one who had to hold up the woman who was in a stretcher. So she had to get her out
Wow.
of the plane
Wow.
and hold her up. Now, they all got rescued. I don't even know how it happened. They didn't have a beacon on the plane that worked, apparently.
Wow.
And it was a storm, but someone on the island had seen them and they went out and rescued
Wow.
them. Her story of surviving a plane crash was one of the most incredible that I've heard. And she now tours around for the Australian Air Force talking to pilots about how to
Wow.
recover from PTSD. How
That's
about that
amazing.
for like an
That's
incredible
amazing.
woman? The
That
another
is
woman
amazing.
that I absolutely love, and I was
Uh-huh.
very lucky that I was introduced to her.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, and I can't think of what her name is now, but she had worked with Oprah Winfrey as her chief of staff for 11 years.
11 years.
And
Wow.
then when I get into the story with her,
Uh-huh.
she had grown up in New York. She had been an EA for Maury Povich, who I
Uh-huh.
think is quite famous over there for a TV show.
Mhm.
She then went and worked with Jan Wenner from Rolling Stone magazine as
Wow.
his EA,
Wow.
and then heard that there was an anonymous person in Chicago that was
Mhm.
looking for an EA. And when I talk about an executive assistant, I'm talking about she was in charge of 11 other staff, I think it was.
Wow.
And she said she knew when they said that it was somebody who had private planes, it would have to be Oprah because she was the only person who had private planes in Chicago. And her story was just so inspiring. And she now goes out and works with organizations about
Wow.
how to bring love into the organization, as in
Wow.
love your employees and love your
Mhm.
staff and love your customers. You know, you start off meeting someone thinking, I'll talk about this, and their story as it unravels is absolutely extraordinary. The other thing that was really interesting to me, and I think I've done about 300 interviews with female founders, particularly entrepreneurial women, is
Yeah.
about 60% of them started their life as lawyers. That really surprised me.
That is. Oh
And
my.
so the law, which is not something that I associate with
Yes.
entrepreneurship, is fostering all these incredibly entrepreneurial women.
I mean, you've been rattling all of these stats out. That is quite mind blowing. But I mean, the stories are fantastic as well. The great, amazing stories. And um, yeah, I understand one of your courses as well is named "How to Become a Woman of Influence," and it
Yes.
focuses on helping women raise their profile. You've met so
Yep.
many extraordinary women. The stories that you just told just now are all incredible. What are some of the key things that you teach in this course when you say how to become a woman of influence? Why is it important for women to embrace visibility today? And has it changed throughout time? Has it gotten better?
Well, there's no doubt that it has changed. And,
Mhm.
when you think that women, in Australia, there were, and I'm sure in America as well, but there are in recent times, like in the 60s, I think, you couldn't open a bank account unless your husband approved it. You
Oh,
couldn't start a business. So, I mean, so clearly things have moved on.
mhm.
But what I teach in the reason that I teach women in how to become a woman of influence is
Yeah.
because if you want to make change happen in the world, you can't be invisible. And so,
Mhm.
what I want to do is help women who, want to help with domestic violence, want to help with climate change, want to help with, I mean, there's so many things that women, which is another interesting thing that many women are very purpose driven in their businesses and give back to the community in a way that a lot of men, when they start businesses, don't
Yes,
do.
of course, of
But in
course.
order to, I always say that in order to be able to make change happen, you have to be visible and you have to have some influence. You have to
Yes,
know some people that can help you. You need to have a bit of a voice because otherwise you're not going to be able to, get your message out there and make the change happen that you want to see.
hmm
And for me, what I like to teach is a combination of how all these different things will raise your profile. And for me, a lot of it starts with LinkedIn.
hmm
LinkedIn is something that I embraced. I mean, I've been on it since it started, but I
right.
always saw it as a horrible sales platform where people just talked about themselves and sold their stuff, and there was no real interaction. At the beginning of the lockdown, I decided I would treat it a little bit like I'd been treating Facebook, and I would put up my own opinions and thoughts, clearly with more of a business focus,
Of course.
but not make it very formal, like make it sort of more about my personality.
Mhm.
And my profile grew and my network grew, and it also helped having the podcast,
Right,
but
right.
grew from 1,500 to over 10,000.
Mhm.
And that was when I realized that you can reach out to extraordinary people on LinkedIn. It's one of the last social media platforms that is still managed by the person normally who
Mhm.
owns the account. So you can get to CEOs, you can get to very high level people. And then if you have a podcast and you're not saying, hi, I think you're amazing and fangirling them, but you're actually saying, I think you're extraordinary. I'd love to share your story. Could I
Right,
interview you? That they
right,
say
right.
yes. And
Wow.
so that starts building your network of influence, gives you things to post about, starts
Wow.
allowing people to see a little bit of your personality.
Mhm.
And then I basically kind of add in online courses because, again, people can get a flavor of you and your personality and what you can teach. I
Yes.
talk about awards. There is a stat that I learned in Australia. Sorry, here comes another one.
Of course, of course.
13%, I know, 13 as in 3% of business awards go to women. And so I'm like, right, well, women need to be applying for more of them. So
Right.
then I started saying we need to apply for more awards. Then I started talking about women
Mhm.
speaking. And that's really what led to me
There
setting
you
up
go.
Australian Women Speakers,
Mhm.
which
There
I
you go.
absolutely can see could go global
Mhm.
because one of the biggest problems for women is invisibility. And if we
Yes.
group together, back each other, and
Mhm.
find and create a place where people can easily find within their budget and their location a woman to speak at their event, whether they've got a tiny budget or a bigger one.
Mhm.
Um, I think that that makes a real difference. So that's kind of what I teach is how to get up on a stage, how to, and then I also teach PR because clearly I've been doing that for 20
Mhm.
years. So I explain to them and teach them how to get featured in the media for free.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people think that they need to put money behind it, and you don't need money, you just need a great story. And as you
Right.
know, and I know, most people have an amazing story and they don't realize it. So I
Absolutely.
try and help the women understand how extraordinary they are and the difference that they can make if they have some power and influence and if they're more visible.
And absolutely giving them that platform, and that more than just a platform, that bravery, that courage to put themselves out there. Because I
Yeah,
think that's what's really truly is important, is that you have a story, you just have to find that courage to tell that story. And
that's right.
very more particular and significant for women today, of course, because I mean these stats, man, Jules, they just keep coming.
I
You
know
keep
they
telling
blow your mind, don't you? And
it,
yet, I think I mean I'm not down on men
of
because
course.
I know that I've only discovered these stats in the last few years.
Mhm.
They're not made public, and
Mhm.
so that's why I love spouting them
Mhm.
because people don't realize what's going on, we don't know what we don't know, I
Mhm.
guess.
Mhm.
And so, but I do think that. As you say, change is happening now, but I do think that something over the pandemic made a lot of women realize that it's time to step up and that they wanted to go and do something that had more impact and was more purpose driven. And so I feel that there's a global movement of women who are saying, right, it's time for us to make the change happen ourselves. We can't just sit back and wait for it to
Yes.
happen slowly because
Mhm.
it's already been 30, 40, 50 years and
Mhm.
we haven't really progressed anywhere near as far as we should.
Mhm. And this is where you are trying to make a difference, especially when you launch Australian women speakers. You mentioned that
Yeah.
the 30% of women speakers in Australia is not just in Australia, it is also a
Yeah.
global thing. Talk to me about how, I mean, of course, you kind of already answered that question, how you're trying to challenge gender imbalances in public speaking. Can you discuss some of the current challenges that you are encountering when it comes to women facing or going into this field of public speaking, and how have you overcome them so far?
Right. Well, it's very new, Josh. Like I only
Hmm.
launched I started the group on LinkedIn in December last year, so
Oh
only
wow.
7 months ago. And I
Okay. Okay.
launched the directory at the end of March.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's only 3 or 4 months old. Having
Wow.
said that, I can talk to you about why I set it up And that was because I realized that there are a lot of small business groups. There are Rotaries. I don't know whether you have Rotary in America,
Yeah, yes.
but it's, and then we have things like Country Women's Association. We have local councils.
Mhm, mhm,
They are all putting on business events for small business owners, and
mhm,
they need speakers, but they don't want to go to a bureau because they don't necessarily have the budget to go and pay 3 or 4 grand every time,
mhm,
and the commission that the bureau takes. So it was two posts that I saw. One was in a very popular women's group on Facebook with about 200,000 women in it. And a woman was saying, where can I find speakers for my small business breakfast that I put on every month?
mhm,
And I thought, where can you, without actually posting into women's groups and saying, is there anyone who'd like to talk? It's
mhm,
really hard to find them. And the other thing was on LinkedIn, I saw someone from a really big organization. We have 4 big banks in Australia. I think it was from someone from one of the banks saying, we're really fed up seeing the same faces put forward by the bureaus. Where can we find fresh talent? So I knew that there was a need in terms of the people trying to find speakers.
right.
And then the other thing that I had heard from women, and I speak a lot on stages and I see it as well, is these panels that they have at events where they'll have all men, or they have a lineup and there's all men and maybe one woman, a token woman. And when I
Mhm,
go to them and say, why haven't you got more women? Why aren't you doing 50-50? They'll say, oh, it's really hard to find women. I haven't been able to find any women. It's really difficult. So it was those things that made me go, you know what? I think that we need to do something about it. I thought it would be, to be honest, I invited 30 women that I know who speak into this group. I thought maybe it would get to 100, 150. The fact that it's over 1,000 shocked
mhm,
me. It happened very
mhm,
fast and it's still
mhm,
growing. And all these women are looking for opportunities to speak. And
mhm.
so I believe that the other thing that I like to talk to women about is how much further we go if we back each other. So rather than trying to compete
Love
with
that.
each other, which I know is the sort of traditional model, I'm a big believer in collaborating and lifting up women. And my favorite saying is be that person that will mention another person's name in a room full of
I
opportunities.
love that. I love that. I love that. I
And
was going to
so I
ask that.
encourage
Go ahead.
women to go out and refer other women to,
That's it.
if you go and get booked for a speaking gig, normally I will say to them, do you need any more speakers? And nearly always they'll say yes.
Yeah.
We do them every month and I've only got the next 2 months booked. And then I say, okay, try this woman, try that woman. So what I'm trying to encourage women to do is say, go and have a look in the directory, go and have a look in the Facebook and the LinkedIn groups,
Mhm.
put in a post saying you're looking for a speaker and you'll get plenty of responses.
I love that. Jules, it is quite the story and the mission that you're putting out there. I love it. I mean, it's very clear and it's very very driven what you're trying to do for a lot of women out there, and I think it's very very important for today as
Thank
well.
you.
Jules, I want to give you this opportunity. Of course, where can we find you? Where can we connect with you? Of course, we can connect with you on LinkedIn. We are connected there, I believe. Where else can we learn more? What can we do to help this
Okay,
mission of yours?
well, if you want to find out more about the women speakers, we have 2 groups. And let me tell you, Australian women are all looking for opportunities to speak on international stages as
Right,
well.
right.
So if any of your audience globally are interested in having some speakers,
Mhm.
then go to womenspeakers.com.au and you will find there's about 70 on there. There's 1,000 in the Facebook and LinkedIn groups. If you want to find out about She's the Boss, you can go to she'sthebossgroup.com.
Right.
And if you would like to listen to my podcast where I have interviewed extraordinary women, and what I did was I thought I'd do something different. So I said, tell me about your life from about the age of 6 or 7 until now, and how your career has developed, which is always a wiggly worm,
Right.
to now. So they're really inspiring stories, and they are on all the main podcast platforms.
Mhm.
And it's She's the Boss Chats, and it's got a photo of me with my pink hair, so you know it's the right one. So that's probably they're probably the best ways to get hold of me. But LinkedIn, I'm very active on, and I'll always get any messages if you message me via LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Jules, this has been, I mean, I love the energy. I love what you're talking about. I love the mission. I invite all our guests and listeners, give Jules a connect, send her a connection on LinkedIn, talk to her, and find out more everything that we do or everything that she does, everything that we talked about here on this show today. She's the Boss Group. her podcast, and of course, Australian women speakers. Jules, it's been fantastic. I wish I could talk more about those stats, but we could do another one perhaps. And thank you for coming
I
on the
would
show
love to.
today.
Actually, can I just say one more thing?
Please,
I
please.
do a live stream show every week through
Mhm.
LinkedIn, my She's the Boss YouTube channel,
Wow, wow.
and Facebook. And I'm about to start one in a couple of weeks for Australian women speakers, where I'll be
Wow.
interviewing a different women speaker to showcase them. In She's the Boss, I'm showcasing business women. So, yeah.
That's
So
good.
if they want to
That's
see
good.
something sort of fairly soon, you can just, if you hook up with me on LinkedIn, you'll get notified, or
All right,
Facebook or
fantastic.
YouTube.
Fantastic. Again, ladies and gentlemen, go to that live stream. If this is something that you feel is important and you believe in it as well, and we sure do, I sure do, go check out that live stream. Go connect with Jules.
Thank
And
you,
Jules,
Josh.
thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic. And to all our audience and listeners out there, we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.